All right, geeks, welcome back to another bonus episode where Jay and I continue our trapezing across the massive verse. Today
Is
we
there a
are going
reason
to
you went with trapezing?
traipsing is what I was going for, uh,
Hmm.
but
I
I
like it.
said
I like it.
trapezing because
No,
it's
I like it.
it's another episode of Script Heroes Nights. As
I was just I
happens
was just
often
thinking
with our
like that
bonus
you
episodes.
somehow had Nightwing on the brain, and I was
I
like,
always have Nightwing on the brain.
I don't see the connection, but you know what? Good for you.
Um,
But yeah, I'm excited to continue
yeah,
trapezing through the
yeah,
Massiverse.
traipsing across the massive verse.
Traipsing.
Yes, with Inferno Girl Red.
Yes.
Inferno Girl Red is coming to us from creative team Erica DeRusso, who is the artist and co-creator, Matt Groom, who is the writer and co-creator. The colorist is Igor Monti. The background assistant is Lorenzo Tometa. The letterer is Becca Carey, who I think we did. She was the letterer for something recently for us too.
Yeah, the name's
Yeah.
definitely there.
And Kyle Higgins is involved as an editor since this is a part of the
Yeah.
Massiverse, which, if you don't know, is his Radiant Black extended universe. Uh,
Yeah.
so, Inferno Girl is the story of Cassia, who,
Mm-hmm.
during a horrible event that lifts her new home city up out of the ground and sends it off into a different dimension to be consumed by the void, she becomes a superhero in that commotion. The long forgotten, mythologized about Inferno Girl Red bracelet has affixed itself to her Ben 10 style and gives her the ability to go Inferno Girl Red and become this awesome superhero. She is just a kid, though, so she goes through all the struggles of that, where she has to juggle being a superhero with being in school, trying to make new friends, and all of this while the city is trying to function and also possibly find a way back to its previous dimension. We see her go
Yes.
through a lot with her mom, who was friends with the previous Inferno Girl Red, and in a series of epic fights, she comes into her own as her own superhero identity. And naturally, here in the bonus episodes and uh, full volume reviews, we are, of course, spoiler warning, going to spoil things.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
We're gonna talk about everything and anything that happened in this book. I have
exactly, but she
so much to
defeats.
say, so many thoughts. So I think
I'm
this
I'm
this, this is
excited,
gonna
but
cover everything.
to cap off our little summary
Yeah.
here, she defeats Griffin, who it turns out is one of her new friend's father and also one of her teachers, and saves the city from him destroying the force field, protecting it from the void, but loses her mom, who is teleported out of it. Jay, do you think I missed anything?
Uh, we find out at the end that the original Inferno Girl Red is another one of her teachers.
Yes.
I think
Which
that's
was not at all shocking.
no. Yeah, I think that's pretty much
Yeah.
it.
That's the broad strokes, at least. We'll
Yeah,
jump
I
into
have
minutia
so
as it
many
comes up.
thoughts on this.
You have so
Like,
many
I'm gonna
thoughts. Do you have one that you want to start with?
Do
I
you
guess
want
the
me to start
question
with
is,
the
do we want to
big
start
positive or
on the
big
book
negative?
and then go into universe, or do we want to start on universe and then narrow in on the
I
book?
want to start on the book. I
I think so too, yeah. So to
Yeah,
start, I think the biggest thing to bring up is that
yeah.
this is 48-page issues. Maybe thicker than
I
that?
think I think it's I think it's 48 pages of story.
Yes. Yeah.
So like they're big old books.
They are big old
Um,
books. It's a very
yeah.
weird format. And
It
if I
is.
might prompt you, how do you think
Yeah.
that impacted the story structure that we got here?
Not well, I
I'm going to
guess.
agree with that.
Is my answer, because to get my real like huge positive. Well, I have two huge positives. So we'll start with the one that's more general, and then I can gush about my favorite thing later. Like, I love this conceptually.
Right?
Like, I really like the ideas here. I really like the general plot. I really like all the things they have going on. It's a ton. There's like
Yeah.
18 different like it's like new dimension, legacy hero to a hero that we've never met before. You know, the mother-daughter relationship. She's at this new high-tech school with these geniuses. Like, there are so many threads.
Yeah.
Which is really cool, and I think that, you know, they have a lot of space, so it works a little bit better in that sense, but the pacing is a little bit weird. Um and yeah, like my let me get to my like this is yeah, let me get to my main criticism because it might
Go
be a
for
little
it.
bit like dumb. But we had so much space and I was kept waiting and waiting and waiting. And we never find out why she's chosen to be the legacy hero, or why she's given this bracelet, or
Yeah.
why she becomes this hero. And
Or
like
how the
it happened to
bracelet
me, and I was
even
like,
like was unleashed.
yeah, like I thought her mother was going to be more directly connected. We are going to find out
Mhm.
like her mother like helped the teacher choose her or
Yeah.
something like that. Because it kept like I was like, this needs to be explained because it just happened and we got thrust into it,
Mhm.
and it never really comes. Like we get a moment at the end that feels set up for it, where the hero's like, "I'm going to train you because I was the original." I'm like, okay, but why her? Like what?
Yeah.
Because
Like
it feels
how
intentional.
did we
We don't
get
get a
here?
story of like her losing the bracelet and it falling off a building and landing on her
Mhm.
or something. Like it feels intentional that it's
It
the
literally
daughter
like
of her former
flies through a
partner.
window and
Yeah.
hits her.
So like that lack of explanation, and like honestly, I think the reason I brought this up is it ties into my bigger thing is like
Mhm.
for the amount of pages of story we got, which is kind of like a 6 issue mini, just too much of a lack of resolution.
See,
Like
and I think
so many
that
story threads were left open. Yeah,
yeah,
you
lack
take
of
it.
resolution, and also I feel like so much of this book is things happening as opposed to
Like an
things
actual arc.
reacting
Yeah.
almost. Like I feel like
Yes.
we
Yes.
get
That's
all
a
of
good way to
these
put it.
disconnected moments and we don't
Yes.
really have the work built into them. And I will say
Yeah.
that with 48 pages, sure that's a 6 issue, but it is weird. It's not like these are double issues. They're very much set up
No.
as single issues. And I
Yes.
think that's where a lot of the problem comes in, because even though we have the same amount of page space that we would get with 22 pages or 24 pages, it's structured in such a way that the book does not get to move very far each issue, because it's
Yes.
only one issue instead of covering 2 issues. And I think that
Yes.
that's something that could have been avoided if there were different choices made in the scripting phase of it. And I think that it was not the best choices the way that we got it. Like
I
as
agree with
a
you.
kind of prime example, we get basically zero understanding of one, what Inferno Girl Red's powers are, or two, how she uses
Yeah.
them. Like her mother, and see, I thought it was going to be a really cool plot thread for her mom to be like pushing her and pushing her and pushing her to be this superhero, and she's not ready for it because she's a teenager, not a superhero. And I
Yeah.
thought that was going to be like the big plot, and it's like, oh shit, no, I have pushed you too far, and now we're at our breaking point. But that doesn't go into anything. It feels like there's just all of these things that are set up or happen, and then they don't have any sort of, like you're saying, they don't really have a resolution.
Yeah. Yeah. And just to hit the one resolution we do get of
Mhm.
defeating the villain at the end is basically like the difference between her losing the fight and winning the fight is just like do better.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing changes, nothing. It is the most basic, like loses the fight and then does better and wins the fight.
Hmm.
Like there was no real change or arc or anything being learned there, and that's the other thing I'm gonna hit on that I don't love, because then I think I can transition it into my favorite thing about the book.
Hmm.
Um, is that every time she isn't fighting man whose name I'm forgetting
Griffin.
already. Griffin. Anytime she isn't fighting Griffin, she's fighting these monsters, whatever. the stakes feel so low because it feels so easy to her, despite the fact
Yeah.
that she doesn't know her powers.
Exactly.
Like, we're supposed to be getting this vibe of like she doesn't know her powers, she doesn't know how to use them and stuff, but also she just keeps winning and defeating these things with relative ease.
Mm-hmm.
And like we get multiple page fights with them, and this is well transitioned into the best thing. I love the art of this book. It is
It's so
gorgeous.
good.
Erica DeRusso is fantastic. We have these
Yes.
awesome pages. The coloring's amazing. Inferno
Mm-hmm.
Girl Red
That's a
herself,
really big part
design
of it
wise,
too.
is awesome and looks good, and the transformations all look good and the same
Mm-hmm.
but different each time. Like, I love look at, like, I would hate the action sequences if they weren't so beautifully drawn, because
Exactly.
there are no stakes in them. But they are so beautifully drawn that I'm like
They're so
just getting
dynamic
caught up
and
in how awesome
fun.
they are. Yeah, and that also ties into the like what you're saying. Like, I don't know what the powers are either. I'm just looking at
Yeah.
these colorful like energy pages, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know what's really meant to be being communicated here, but it's awesome looking, so that's a positive at least. Like, we know the only power that's really like fully explained is like she has this like dragon attack thing.
Yes.
But even that seemed to work differently, like when it was shown in the past versus when it was shown
Yeah.
now. Because like I think in the past it was shown as like it was like a blast that hit the person, and then like a dragon symbol appeared on them, and then they like but then when
Mm-hmm.
she's using it in the modern day, she's like literally sending a dragon after them.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not equal for the sake.
No, yeah.
But
I think that was certainly very confusing. But to touch on the art some more, just to gush about it a bit more. I
yeah,
also I was such a fan of, there were these like splash pages when something would happen in terms of like leveling up their armor or revealing themselves.
yeah,
And it would have like these very, I don't even know, like these very video gamey catchphrases on them. Like when she first transforms into Inferno Girl Red, she gets this whole splash page that's then like the burning light of hope in the dark. And when
yeah.
Griffin does his, it's like the emissary of the void and shit.
Okay, especially
That
but
is
I have to
good
throw out
shit there.
the one other thing is that
Yeah.
like I am getting such a vibe of Cassie of like we wanted to do Jessica Cruz without Jessica Cruz. She's even got like her eye, like she's got like a
She
birthmark
does. She
around her
has
eye that looks like
yeah. It starts with an A.
yeah.
In any
It's like
case.
Jessica Cruz has the lantern symbol there, and then like when they do the splash page, the burning light of hope in the dark. I'm like, you're kind of trying to do Jessica Cruz here, aren't you?
That's why they threw the green in there, because they're like, oh yes,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
relentless emissary of the eternal void. Like that's my shit right there. Sorry. I definitely see the like Green Lantern influence on this for sure. Straight down to the like kind of magical jewelry. Um
yeah.
I even thought it was a ring when we saw it for the first time, when it like burst through the door. Um
Yeah, I also think the bracelet, like there's because it's not something that I think I'm familiar with, like just like the Radiants or like Power Rangers, like there's
Mhm.
something that when you look at like her modern suit, not so much, but when you look at the original Inferno Girl Red suit, I'm like, that's a character. I can't place it, but that looks like the iconic design of a character that I've definitely seen. Like that white suit with the like just that kind of like like just
Mhm.
one line symbol, without like a like interior. I'm like, it looks like something.
I believe you. I don't have the same familiarity with it, even like the kind of passing one. But I fully
Yeah,
believe
I
you
have
that
such a passive feeling that I'm like, I don't know what it is, but it looks so familiar to me, and I'm like, I feel like I should know what it is, but that's okay. It's neither here nor there. But
yeah, the art is so good, and it makes
so
the action scenes so phenomenal. Um, I guess the kind of problem I have with it is that it doesn't feel like it was complete. It doesn't feel like we really got as much story as they should have given in this. And it's not that
yeah, I
they
agree.
spent too much time on the action or anything. I think they did a fine job balancing like fight scenes and civilian scenes. But the civilian scenes didn't give the context that I think we needed. It very much feels like the
I
first
agree.
3 books of something that's going to keep going. And while maybe that was the hope, they haven't gotten more books yet. And what we talked about a book on the pod where we had that criticism where it's like, I feel like you should have taken advantage of what you had instead of trying to set yourself up for something more. And I don't remember what it
The
was.
ending of Chicken Devil.
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah. Where it's like you were given an amount of books to like create an audience, and I feel like you
Yeah,
shouldn't have banked on
yeah.
having
Even
an
and that's even an example
audience.
where they got it, but it just makes that first thing feel a little bit like ah, that you just like reopened everything here. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, and like that's like I'm I fully agree with what you're saying. I'm going to
Mhm.
disagree a little bit on the reasoning of like I don't even think it's like because I don't think it's fixed if they get more books. Like I don't think that's
Yeah, it
like
doesn't
magically solves the
retroactively
way
make
they paced and
volume
built the
one
story across
better.
these first three.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like because it's like they concluded some bits and then like stretched out other things. It lands a little bit weird, especially because you mentioned the civilian scenes. The civilian scenes feel really weird to me
Hmm.
because it feels like they're supposed to be like almost already existing relationships that we care about. Like it just I don't
Right?
know. I struggle to buy into relation. I think some of it is I'm not the I like it for the battle scenes because it feels very like I don't know, like action cartoony to me. I'm not a
Hmm.
fan of the dialogue in the civilian scenes.
Me
A
either.
lot
I
of it
think that.
feels very heavy-handed to me of like no, look, this mother-daughter relationship is so beautiful and then the especially the relationship between Cassia and her roommate whose name
Henrietta.
I'm forgetting here
Henriette. Yeah, that one
feels like
is
it went from
the
0 to
biggest
100
problem.
immediately.
Exactly. And I think that that factors into another problem with I had with it where it's one of those books where you really can't tell if it's been a day, a week, or a month or what in
Oh, I have
universe.
no clue.
Exactly. Like I think that it was over the course of like 3 days or something, which
That sounds about right.
again really makes it rough when it's this like superhero origin story. Like it doesn't feel like we get to watch her in
Yeah.
learn how to become the hero that
Eh,
she becomes. And that's part of why it feels so unsatisfying when in that last fight, despite how awesome the fight looks, her kind of resolution is just like, oh, I need to believe in myself. I was
Yeah.
actually holding the Inferno back. The Inferno wasn't holding back on me or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And we didn't get enough superheroing, and the civilian side of it wasn't, to compare it to something that I think makes a very good direct comparison. In Radiant Black Volume 1, all of the civilian we get, the shit with Nathan, the shit with Marshall, it
Yeah.
does such a good job of then making Nathan's fucking coma so impactful, so important.
Yeah.
And also it
And even
just
if you want to
is.
throw it over to something that I think it maybe is more direct because it's like a new character coming in there on one, like Radiant
Mhm.
Red.
Yeah.
Like Radiant Red, you get to this feeling and you're like, oh man, these are complex. And like that's the other things. These don't feel like complex
No.
characters, really. Like in Radiant Red, it's like, oh my god, like the boyfriend's an ass, but you kind of get why sometimes, and you get how she's getting on his nerves sometimes, and then like you
Mhm.
fully sympathize with her being pissed off at him, but then she goes and robs banks, and you're like, you
It's like,
can't
girl, that's
do
not the
that. That's not
solution.
the other side of it. Yeah, and like so you understand the struggle, but you also understand where and like they have these complex relationships, and you're always a little bit unsettled because you don't know which way the relationship's going to go. And not
Mhm.
that every relationship needs to be contentious or whatever, but
No,
like
yeah.
you need a little bit of nuance that isn't just like these two met and became roommates like 3 days ago, and then like on our second interaction with them, they seem to be like the closest people we've ever met in our
Yeah.
lives. Like
No,
it's
and it
just like
it
a
very
little
much
bit more
bothers me.
intrigue would be nice.
Because
And then
I
again,
feel like it
freaking the,
uses.
the villain's son, he is the weirdest
He does
character. He appears
nothing.
basically only in issue 2, and then they start building up a little bit of dynamic between the two of them, and he gets a little bit pissed at her for abandoning him, and then the plot thread is dropped.
Right? And that's another thing where it feels like the same kind of thing with um so much setup and no payoff. Because it's not even that things aren't resolved, it's that it feels like nothing is nothing that feels like setup is actually used as setup, and so none of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
payoff has setup to happen with it. Like with the
yeah,
son with Thomas, the son of the big bad, we
yeah,
don't know that yet.
yeah.
If like it turned out he like was a gadget expert or something, and so he was like, hey, she was nice to me, dad, I don't want to like destroy the world with
We
you,
never even.
here's
I
an
don't think we
upgrade.
see him once we find out his
I
dad's
don't
the
think
villain.
so.
I don't think he
Yeah,
appears after that realization, which is crazy.
especially because they make such a point of spending time with him, and specifically
I think he literally only appears in issue 2, though,
I
which
think
is
so
really
too,
weird.
which is so weird. And that's kind of what I mean by they don't spend their civilian time wisely. None of it feels like it's
Yeah, yeah,
advancing character
totally agree.
relationships. Doesn't feel like it's advancing,
The
any
sad thing is
sort
that that
of
felt like it was really starting an interesting character
exactly.
relationship, and then
And then there was no payoff for it.
yeah.
It's so baffling. Do
So,
we go ahead?
unless because I have one more criticism I want to hit on,
Yeah.
and then unless you have anything else you want to hit on, I think maybe then we transition to talking in about this like place in the Massiverse, because
Hmm.
that's actually something I think I have way more positive things to say about.
Yeah. And I think it's really
So
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So the last thing I want to hit on is another thing of like, and I think these were maybe kickstarted, so maybe that's why the issues feel so disjointed
Hmm.
from one another. That's another problem. It's just each issue feels very disjointed. But my main thing is like a whole new like technique pops up in the third issue that isn't used any time before, and it's used twice in the third issue, which is a character being drawn in like this sketchy black and
Yeah.
white when
Yeah.
like they're in like an embarrassing moment. I'm like, why'd that pop up randomly twice in the last issue?
And like the thing is, as someone who was not like a major weeb or anything, but watched an anime or two, like the vibe of character does something embarrassing, character goes black and white and like sketchy is visual language that I understand and that I actually think is pretty funny. Um it just didn't work here because one, it didn't really fit the vibe of the book that the book had created over the previous two issues. And two, it didn't fit the tone of the book either. Like this book doesn't okay, my goobery kind of conclusive thought on that is that I feel like this book struggles both with tone and theme. Like I feel like there's not a great identity for this book, if that makes sense.
I yeah, it feels like it's standing on just a really like cool character, cool art. Like that feels like what it's standing on, which is
Hmm.
a little thin. Um,
And it's
yeah.
really cool
But do
character,
you want to talk
really
about its
cool
place in the
art.
mass? Yeah,
But yes,
yeah.
yes.
That's why I want to talk about its place in the Massiverse. Um,
So the Massiverse, if
yeah,
for the uninitiated, is Kyle Higgins. It's not really an imprint of Image, I don't think. But it's
no, it's not an imprint.
like
It's
an
a
initiative
universe.
essentially to create
It's a
just
shared
a
universe.
classic
Yeah,
superhero multiverse, not multiverse, shared universe.
yeah,
So like we
yeah.
have the Radiant Black gang, so Radiant Black, Radiant Red, Radiant Yellow, Radiant Pink. Who am I forgetting? No one?
Those are. I
Well,
think
no
that's it.
one
There
will
was
come
only
up
4 of
later,
them,
but
right?
there must only I must be thinking of Radiant Black 2.0.
I
Because
think there's only
Marshall
4 of
and
them.
it feels wrong that there's only
Possibly
four.
being dumb. No, but I think there are only 4 of them. That feels. I think that's right.
Like it's correct. I think it's correct. It feels wrong. There
That's
should
no.
be
That's super
five.
fair. That's super fair.
um,
That's super fair.
but so it's them. We've also got Inferno Girl Red. There is Rogue Sun,
Rogue Sun,
No
No
One,
One,
and Dead Lucky.
Dead Lucky. Yeah.
I think that might be all of them.
In terms of characters that have their own books, I think so.
I think in terms of just everyone, right?
There's
Or I
Shift.
suppose,
There's
yeah, there's like the villains and stuff.
yeah, I think Dead Lucky's a villain too. I think.
Maybe. We read Supermassive 2022, and decided it wasn't
Yeah.
relevant enough to Inferno Girl to include. She steps on a
No.
puppy, essentially. Like, it's a monster, but it's a little puppy monster. So maybe she's a villain.
Yeah.
In any
Yeah.
case,
Her introduction seemed like a villain.
yeah.
I did quite like Cassia in that book, though. In
I feel like she
Supermassive.
was a little. She didn't feel like the same character.
Yes,
I'm not
that's
gonna
true.
lie.
She felt very like I just didn't know how she got there. I was like, how do
She
you go
felt
from like
very
being in your
radiant
little like
pink as opposed to being herself.
hmm. None of them really felt like themselves to me. Like maybe, well, I
Right?
guess Rogue
Marshall
Sun, I
was a
don't
little
know.
too jokey. I don't know
Yeah,
anything about Rogue
yeah,
Sun, but then
yeah. That's why
Cassia
I was
was
like, maybe Rogue
like,
Sun does.
yeah.
So yeah, yeah,
But in
but
any case, that is the
yeah,
massive first. It's supposed to be like
yes, yeah,
a new universe of
yeah,
superheroes so DC and Marvel don't get to monopolize superheroes.
yeah. And we've talked about how like interesting it is to actually because basically since the initial image wave, nobody's really tried to beat
Yeah.
DC or Marvel at their own game. It's been a lot of let's do something different enough that we're not going to be,
Hmm.
stepping on their toes. And then the Massiverse is like, nah,
The
we'll
Massiverse
do
is like,
exactly what
nah,
we
and
want.
then Ghost Machine is kind of trying to do it too. So, like,
Yeah,
we're
but I still think
seeing,
they're in the realm of like doing something different enough because they're not
yeah,
really
like
doing like a
it's not
superhero shaded
superheroes saving
universe.
the city, but
Yeah, like Massiverse, I think, is the only thing that's really trying to do like a
yeah.
superhero shared universe. Um. So anyway, why don't you start us off with opening thoughts on the place of this in the Massiverse, how it affects the Massiverse? We've got for the first time an alternate universe kind of being
Hmm.
involved, even though we're not going there. We're
We're
transfer
coming
like
from
it's
there, yeah.
just them coming in. But
I
I think
think
that's an interesting.
that I really like the idea of the Massiverse, and I am so
Yeah,
here for this. I think that I'm a little concerned that there are too many parallels between this and the Radiance. Like, one of the very first problems that Cassia has is she can't figure out how to get her helmet off, and her mom is like, just, feel it come off. And that is so closely parallel with
yeah. I will
the
say I don't think I
interaction
think it's the whole
between
suit in this
the
compared to
whole
being the
suit, the
helmet.
helmet, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
I
it
was just
just
saying it's not the
feels
exact same line because in Radiant it is the helmet, and in this it's the whole suit, so it's slightly different. Copy my
it's
homework,
yeah.
but don't
Yes.
change it a little bit.
Uh but so there's and like the way that everything looks is also very similar with the kind of like energy blast vibe, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if we're like kind of going
Yeah,
with that vibe, but also just in terms of like, oh, you have this thing that is giving you powers. Like, if I'm thinking of something like, if we're gonna just kind of call this like their answer to the Justice League per se,
yeah,
like, this is as if it was a Justice League with four different Green Lanterns and then another
yeah,
kind of Green Lantern, you know?
yeah. Well, I think the just because I'm feeling people yelling at us after that, we know that this is coming from somebody who did Power Rangers, and it's heavily Power
Yes.
Rangers
Yes.
inspired, and that I think is why we
But
get the vibe
talking
of
about
like
it,
similar characters with different colors.
for
You know?
sure. And I get that. And I think that it
Yeah.
works really well for Radiant Black and like the other Radiants. But I feel like then
Yes. Well,
she is
that's
not
where I was going
distinct
to come out.
enough.
Is like,
Like,
yeah, once
instead
we've
of
gotten another
having
character. Yeah.
a bunch of Green Lanterns, because again, we're analoging to the Justice League, instead of having a bunch of Green Lanterns and then a Superman or a Batman or a Wonder Woman or whatever, it feels like we've just got another Green Lantern who's just again
Four
slightly
Green
different.
Lanterns and Boots to Gold.
Exactly. Where it's like you're too similar for
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
What are
No,
your
no. I
thoughts
think
on its
that's
connections to the
yeah.
like
So I have a
Massiverse?
few like one, especially after reading the first Superman and like getting Rogue Sun too. I think a little bit of a problem with the Massiverse is everybody's powers feeling very samey.
Hmm.
Again, like I get that it's kind of the Power Rangers vibe thing. So I'm not gonna like harp on that. The other thing is like so here's my like and obviously the Massiverse is years ahead, so we'll see. This maybe has already been like confirmed, denied, whatever. My thought is is it makes sense if the vibe they're going for is like Inferno Girl Red, and like this thing is like that universe's
Yeah.
equivalent to the Radiance. So
Hmm.
like they have their, and like she's essentially Radiant Red, but of her
Yeah.
universe. Um, so like that makes it doesn't fix the problem of everybody being super samey, but at least
Yeah.
logically in my head it'll fit a little bit better. I this was the only thing we talked about prior to hopping on. I also just don't get the naming of Inferno Girl Red instead of like just Inferno Girl when you have a
Yeah.
Radiant Red that you like just dropped. Um,
And like what
like
I
I
will
guess
say
the
is I
colors are like a big
like
thing
I like the
in the
nomenclature
Masterverse.
of the name Inferno Girl Red. I think that one of the rad things about like the Massiverse is that they don't rely on like classic superhero nomenclature. Like Radiant Black a little bit, but it's definitely not like a normal superhero name. Like and Infernal Girl Red again feels very distinct. Rogue Sun feels super distinct.
Rogue
No
Sun's
one, I
super
guess.
out there.
Rogue Sun is super out there, yeah. And so like I like it as a
Yeah, I don't know
name.
if
I
I'd say
just
no
don't
one. No
understand
one, I
it
think, is actually maybe the most like normal out of them.
probably.
Weirdly enough,
But I think that it's
yeah.
still decidedly like it's not Catman, you know? Uh
No, no, no.
um so like I like it conceptually as a name, but like you're saying, it's weird to do it when they have a red already.
Yeah. And that's like
And I
one of the
think
featured one. Like that's the second biggest one. Like
yeah.
why? What are you doing? Also, like this is weird. This is out of left field, but I'm gonna ask you because I have no idea, and
Mhm.
it's something that I guess because it's the first book where it's a character that wasn't like introduced in Radiant Black, so this popped up to me, especially because they credit them as like the two co-creators. Like, do Erica DeRusso and Matt Groom own Infernal Go Red? Like, could they pull it out of the Massiverse if they wanted to?
I
Like, how does
think they
that work?
must, because like you said, it was a Kickstarter first, and I mean maybe they sold
Is
her.
that why it's from another universe so they can like shove it back if they lose
Maybe,
it? Like, is that the idea? I don't
maybe,
know. That's a question I have because it feels,
because it
I don't
is
know,
also worth
odd.
mentioning. Again, it hasn't gotten more books yet, and this came out in I think 2022, 2021.
2022, yeah. I think the Massiverse started either late 2021 or 2022.
Okay, this actually
I think
came
late.
out first
2020.
January of 2023,
Oh, okay.
book one. So like I suppose a year between isn't that absurd, but I don't know that I've heard any rumblings
No,
about a
especially
book
because well,
two
this
for it.
started right, which is the other weird thing. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a little odd, a little confusing,
A
but
little odd, a little
yeah,
confusing. I'm really
I'm
excited to
very
see
interested in
what the
to
other
pull this character out of the Massiverse.
yeah. I'm excited to see what the other introductions to the Massive Verse are. Like we know from Supermassive 2022 that Marshall has like seen Rogue Sun and he's like a fan
Yeah.
of him. So they clearly exist together in the same universe.
Yes.
Whereas she is by design coming from this alternate universe, which already
Yes.
makes it a bit of a wacky tie-in to the Massive Verse.
Because there's not like if we remove theories and speculation,
Mm-hmm.
of like it's a way to put them back if they don't
Yeah.
want it, or they're the radiant of the other unit. We remove speculation. We look just at the story. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, they kind of built it in with the whole idea of like, it's so the void can consume me. Why'd that have to be another universe? Like it
Right?
I don't think there's a huge story reason for her to be from another universe. Like it feels like the same story could have been done with just like the land being picked up and like brought in to space
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, or like, like hovering above the world. Um so and that's not being like it's worse because she's from another universe. I don't think it is, but I'm curious as to like what the thought was
It's
with
just an
pulling her from
odd
another universe.
choice when you're specifically, especially because I think she was the first non-radiant entry, right? Like
I
looking at her,
think
reading
her
her,
and Rogue
her and
Sun
Rogue
are
Sun.
like basically same time pretty much, but yes, I think she comes out ever so slightly before him. They both, in terms of release order, they both debut in Supermassive first,
Yeah.
and then their issues come, I think, maybe a month apart. You can look at the back of issue 3, and I think it'll have the dates for the releases here. Actually,
In
let
any
me
case,
look.
it's an odd choice to go, we're doing our shared universe. Also, this one's from an alternate universe.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you there. I thought, oh, it's at the back of it's at the back of the Supermassive book, where they have, because they're advertising the upcoming. So
Naturally.
yeah, let me see if I can actually find this.
Yeah, and it's
Am I spending way
also
too much time on something that
interesting
doesn't matter?
for it started its life as a Kickstarter, so it wasn't. I don't. Do you know, was the Kickstarter intended for it to be a
I
part of the
I do
Massiverse?
know. I
Like, Kyle Higgins is
I
credited as an editor on here.
The weird thing is, like, it feels almost like there were two versions of the Kickstarter, because they share the original story that they put on the Kickstarter to like sell it, which is with the
Mm-hmm.
original version of the character before they, like, I guess, change it. So I'm guessing that Kyle Higgins got involved somewhere along the process and it changed, but obviously before anything was released,
Right.
So, um, so Infernal Girl Red. Oh, they have the graphic novel. So the graphic novel came out in late 2022, whereas Rogue Sun came out in February 2022. But I don't know when Infernal Girl Red. Like, do you have the date on there of when
Yeah.
Infernal Girl Red issue 1
January
came out?
2023. At least that's what it is in the front matter. That's not
Uh,
always completely accurate.
I guess if the issues originally came out through Kickstarter, I guess that's the vibe. The Kickstarter ones probably came out whenever they came out. Then they released the graphic novel late 2022, and then they probably re-released the issues in stores at some point after that. So
That
Infernal Girl Red
tracks.
probably, at least in the direct market, initially released as the graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the Kickstarter, maybe that's the weirdness around like the release order and stuff and the reading order, is because like the Kickstarter is a
Mm-hmm.
different time like when it
But I
came out in
guess that
stores.
again makes the question for me is she intended to be a part of the Massiverse? Like, was she? I don't think she was made to
It
be.
depends on what you mean by intended. It made to be definitely not, because they talk about like at the back, like
Their
making, and then
original
you can read the
ideas, yeah.
original. Yeah, you can read the original like version, which is with the OG version of the character, who ends up being kind of the legacy, in this version. So yeah,
Yeah, and I
I
guess
definitely
what
don't think it
throws
was
me off then
conceived to be
is
a part of it.
if you are already making changes to make it a part of the Massiverse, why
Yeah,
didn't you make more? you know? Like, why didn't you make it
the
feel like a part of the
wild
universe?
speculation, because what do we do besides speculate wildly here? Um, my thought is that they still want to be, if they want to, like, able to tell whatever their original idea
Mm-hmm.
was, which is why they made the Massiverse version the legacy, so they could
Mm-hmm.
easily go back and tell whatever their story is with the original, and then just be like, okay, that's what happened before we came to this universe,
Yeah.
and did the legacy.
Which is totally fair, and like, to again, I feel like I keep wanting to draw comparisons to the Justice League, because I feel like that's what the Massiverse is trying to do, is be this shared universe of superheroes. Like,
Yeah,
obviously, even if they're not officially on a team together or whatever, obviously a Batman comic is going to look very different than a Green Lantern comic. So
yeah, I'm gonna
there's
throw something out here, because I think
oh,
it's relevant. Because so we're not just continuing to talk our asses.
I love talking about my ass.
Inferno Girl Red 2 was also launched as a Kickstarter back in August of 2023, and it funded. So in
Okay,
theory, I don't know whether or not people have it yet, but the
that's just
Kickstarter
it's
happened, and I guess they're continuing to do Kickstarters. Which, by the way, being a part of the Massiverse clearly really helped with Kickstarter.
hot
$93,780
damn.
raised.
But I guess it just confuses me, because it's like, why wouldn't Image just put out like, obviously for the regular reasons, like, I don't know. I guess
So
I'm
that you can make $90,000.
Fair enough. It's
No,
just
no, but like
thinking
usually what
about
you
it
would
in
do is
terms
like
of like
you'd have
the
it out. Yeah,
context of the massive verse. Like I would
yeah,
think that the
yeah.
intention of the massive verse is to make a new roster of like household name superheroes.
I think the weird thing is just that they're very like I guess open on letting people do kind of what they want to do with it. Like
Hmm.
it's that weird thing of and I think this is a little bit because they have Kyle Higgins as like the guy who like owns the Massiverse, even if he maybe
Right.
doesn't own everything in it. But like it feels very like the early '90s image where it's like let's make a shared universe, but we all own our own things, which means oh wait, people can pull the plug and leave whenever they want, and then oh no, how does this actually work?
Yeah.
So it feels obviously it's nowhere near as disjointed that is, but
No,
it feels
yeah.
a little bit weird where it's like you all kind of own your stuff, so maybe you're going to decide to do a Kickstarter, and we can't tell you no because you own it. But
Right.
also, that doesn't really fit the way that we're building this universe. But clearly, things are
It
probably
works
working
out for
for
them,
them.
yeah.
So yeah, so
It
I don't
just
want to
leaves
like
me
sit here and be like,
confused about what the intention or like what the purpose of the massive verse is.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean that's super like it's true. Like you're correct. It's just yeah, I also wonder, but like, I guess the thing that I'm trying to say is that I don't think they have a grand like plan on that
No, no.
scale. And, like, I think it's just the idea is let's make some comics that are connected, and that'll be fun. Um, it took me way
Which
too
is
long
a
to put
fair
that thought together,
enough,
but yeah,
it is a beautiful goal to have fun. It just leaves me wondering why is it one of the biggest things in Image? Like, what is Image getting out of it?
uh, books that don't freaking reset every 6 issues.
Fair. I just feel like I go to C2E2 every year and there's a hey, let's check out the Massiveverse panel with like a bunch of Massiveverse creators. And I keep not going because I'm like, I don't want spoilers because I'm not caught up. But it's like, so what is the purpose of the Massiveverse? It's not an imprint. It's not a team. What is it? Ugh. It
What
confuses
is it?
me.
Where?
Yeah, no, come on, what is it? No one can tell me.
It's shared universe,
Yes, but why?
so that they can do one crossover a year.
Fair enough, I suppose.
That is because like listen, am I speaking out my ass because I haven't read other stuff? Yeah. But from what I've heard people mainly talk about is outside of the Radiants, who I think do pop up, like,
Mhm.
in Radiant Black and across the like I don't think they really cross over at all outside of the one supermassive book, a year,
And
which
like it
does
confuses me
make the
then.
question of like why? Why then is Rogue Sun in the same world, and why then is um
Inferno
my
Girl
brain
Red.
is farting. Inferno Girl Red in the same, and really, why is no one in the same universe? Because
I've read none
from
of
what I read in
them.
that book, that is the one that so far to me feels the least like it makes sense. But um, yeah, I don't know. The, it's a fun like
It is.
the thing
I
we said about
like the
Radiant
stuff in
Black
it.
is that like it does everything very competently, and I think that's true for the Massiverse on a whole. Even if Inferno Red, I think tested that a little bit more than the other books, but yeah, no, it's just it's I think consistency and competency goes a long way in comics where nobody else is doing more than 6 issues.
No, no, yeah. I am excited by the Massive Verse. I'm just also
Yeah,
confused by it. Like I understand it in
yeah,
terms of the Radiance and all of their books,
yes,
but then you bring in these
yes,
other ones and like they don't connect. I've
no,
connected nothing.
no, that's super fair. I am excited for Rogue Sun though, which I'm
Me
sure we'll
too.
end up
Yeah.
doing sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think that's
But
going to be our next Massive Verse foray, our next Trapes.
yeah, and then I think it's back to Radiant Black,
And then
if
I
I'm
think
not
it's back to
mistaken.
Radiant
So
Black. I feel like we missed Radiant Black. I the Massiverse book we read completely incorrectly. I think we needed another volume of Radiant Black before that as well.
Really?
Like, I just finished Radiant
What?
Black
What?
Volume 2, which, as a side note, issue 10 of Radiant Black, Chef's Kiss. That's the one where Marshall, like,
Yeah, I
goes
want to talk to you
into the.
about Radiant Black Volume 2, a while ago, and you just hadn't read it.
I just hadn't read it.
Um,
But I did read it
what were
now.
you like? What did you feel like you were missing in
Like, Nathan
the
was just
Massiverse
so
book?
up
It
and
felt
at him.
pretty,
And, like, Marshall talked about going to space. And, like, did he just mean when he and Radiant Pink, like, teleported to space briefly?
yeah. Does the fight not also go to space when they're like teleporting all the way or like all around, because they teleported a ton in that fight? Um,
Maybe.
yeah, I
Still.
don't know. It didn't feel crazy to me, like, because I knew,
And, like,
again,
he
it's a
was
little bit
at the
longer for me. So
movies
it's still like,
with his ex
Nathan
girlfriend.
woke up.
I don't know.
Did,
In any case, issue
That
10 of
was
Radiant
that.
Black,
Didn't the ex like
phenomenal.
come? I've read this way too long ago. Didn't the ex like come back when he was in the coma and be like,
Yeah, but we
I
got
care about you
nothing
again
with the
because
two.
now you're dying.
Yeah, maybe. In any case, we
Sorry,
will
my
play video
favorite
games and
fiction
talk about
trope
Radiant
of,
Black or something.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
but
Wow, we've rambled.
I think that is going to take us to the end of today's episode. We will
Okay.
be back on Wednesday with our regularly scheduled programming. At some point, we're going to do a live stream back
Oh,
issue review. Maybe it was earlier
at some
today.
point,
I don't think it was. It
it
might
was
be
definitely
next
not.
week. Oh, right, because
It'll
you
be
are
next week.
currently on vacation.
I am currently on vacation.
Hello, present day Jay. Hope you're enjoying your vacation. Uh,
Definitely will not be watching this.
Fair enough. Hello, Mr. Jason Ascave. Hope you're enjoying your vacation. Um, but that is going to do it for us. As always, we'll see you next week. Comic
Comic
Geeks.
geeks.